I had a comment the other day, and I love reading your comments. This is like the only interaction I get to have with Pokemon. So if you appreciate the content, please not only hit that subscribe button down below, but leave a like on the video and leave a comment. It just goes a really long way for the algorithm. It really helps spread the channel around, and I really enjoy reading the comments, interacting, and just talking shop, talking Pokemon. And somebody had mentioned the dark ages of Pokemon, and then they kind of went on and talked about what they meant by the dark ages. And we talk about the Pokemon market a ton in here, but there's been so much that's been involved in Pokemon throughout the years. And what they were talking about when they were referencing the dark ages was you had this giant burst of just demand when it came to Pokemon when it first came out. So we're talking about like late 90s, early 2000s, all the way up to Gen 2, and then leading into Neo Genesis, Neo Discovery, Neo Revelation, and then Neo Destiny. And then things kind of slowly started to slow down a little bit, trickle downwards a little bit. We had Wizards of the Coast, which ended up selling off the rights to making the Pokemon trading card game to Nintendo. Nintendo kind of took over with the EX era, and there was still some popularity when it came to Pokemon, but it really started to dwindle. And after we really got through the first half of that EX era, that's when you really had kind of this dark ages of Pokemon where it just wasn't very popular anymore. A lot of people had gotten out of the game. We've talked about it before, but Pokemon's target demographic during that time was really kids. It was really people who were watching the anime, kids who were playing the trading card game, who really enjoyed going out and buying Pokemon toys. So because those kids were starting to grow up a little bit, they were losing interest in Pokemon and starting to develop interest in other things like sports and jobs and things like that. So as we got through the EX era, buying Pokemon cards really kind of settled down. However, during that time, after we got through the EX era, we started entering Diamond and Pearl and Platinum, and a lot of players who continued to play the game, that is like their favorite era of Pokemon when it comes to competitive play. And then we had Heart Gold, Soul Silver come out, and that was just like, that was a really great time for competitive Pokemon. There was a lot of things about the game that weren't great, but a lot of things about the game that were absolutely phenomenal. You didn't have Pokemon like you have today where they have 300, 340 HP, where you've got these monster attacks and things like that. For the most part, they had 100, maybe 120, 80 HP, and you really relied on abilities, you really relied on trainers to try and make sure that you could find a way to knock out your opponent's Pokemon or win in some other area. And the great thing about Pokemon is that throughout the years they have not just settled, right? Like we had base set and we had other sets that came out after base where you had 3 different rarity types or 4 different rarity types. You had the common and uncommon, which are 2, and then you had a non-holo rare and a holo rare, and that kind of stayed the same until Pokemon was like, okay, we have to do something to kind of make this a little bit more exciting. So you had Neo Revelation come out, and that was the first time where you kind of had a new rarity that just kind of hit the field. And it was a new gimmick that Pokemon tried out with Shining Magikarp and Shining Gyarados, and it took off really well. People really enjoyed pulling that Shining Gyarados and that Shining Magikarp. So because of that, they continued it in Neo Destiny, and you had all those other Shinings that came out, Shining Charizard, Shining Mewtwo, and that continued, and things kind of settled down a little bit. And then you've had all these different gimmicks that Pokemon has tried throughout the years. Obviously, we had VMAX cards and V-Star cards that are currently in the format right now. We have these new Terra Pokemon that a lot of people aren't too crazy about in the current moment, where they have these hats and things like that. We had Prism Star cards, we've had Break cards, we've had those really cool Legend cards where you have 2 pieces that you kind of have to put together on your field in order to attack. Same thing with V-Union, which a lot of people compared to Exodia and kind of made a joke out of it, even though Mewtwo V-Union actually did pretty good. One of the eras that was personally one of my favorites, and I really enjoyed this era, was Prime cards. And we're going to talk about Prime cards in today's video, but this right here from 2011, this is probably my favorite deck to play of all time. This is just a ton of fun. This is called Lost Gar, and it focuses on Gengar Prime and Mewprom. So there's 2 different cards in here. There's Gengar Prime and Mewprom as far as primes go. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to use Gengar Prime in order to put your opponent's Pokemon in the Lost Zone. And then your goal is to get out your Lost World Stadium card, because once during each player's turn, if that player's opponent has 6 or more Pokemon in the Lost Zone, that player may choose to win the game. So it's a brand new winning mechanic to the game that kind of got entered in. So You can win the game by knocking out all of your opponent's Pokemon. You can win the game by having your opponent have no Pokemon on the field, and you can win the game by your opponent not being able to draw any cards at the beginning of their turn. This introduced a new way to win. So because of that, a lot of people got really excited about this new potential, and Primes being a really cool card at the time. And there weren't a lot of Primes that were printed. If you think about it, there was only about 25, maybe 30 different Primes that are in existence. If you consider the promo cards and things like that, and this deck did extremely well in Japan. However, one thing that's important to remember is Japan's format is very different than the United States format. They have kind of a wider block in their standard rotation, which means that a deck like this had access to a lot of other cards that weren't necessarily available in the United States. So when this deck came out, when Heart Gold Soul Silver came out in the United States, a lot of people were like, okay, or when Triumphant came out in the United States, they were like, okay, I really want to play Gengar Prime. I really want to play this Lost Guard deck. And it did okay. It did okay, but then a lot of counters were developed, and it just fell off the face of the earth. It didn't end up doing extremely well at any event. I think the best it did was like a top 64 at the 2011 United States National Tournament, and that was pretty much it. So after just dominating in Japan, it came over to the United States, did not perform really well. A lot of counters, a lot of bigger Pokemon started kind of hitting the field. A lot of decks that played less Pokemon relied more on item search, and because of that, it was harder to fill up a Lost Zone. It was just very, very interesting. However, a very cool deck, a lot of fun to play. If you don't play competitive Pokemon, I highly recommend just picking it up. Download PTCG Live, just mess around with it a little bit. It's a ton of fun. I'm going to stop blabbering about the actual deck that I enjoy, which is Lost Guard. Look into it. It's so cool. We're going to talk about Primes. Primes are very, very interesting to look at. They're really cool cards, but not often talked about, not often looked at. And my goal is never ever to draw attention to cards that I think should be bought out or anything like that. I think these are just really cool cards. I have some Primes in old decks, and that's pretty much it. I don't have a very large collection of Primes because I really only need them to play with, and that's pretty much it. But they have done extremely well over the past year, and it seems like they're continuing to climb despite the fact that Pokemon is in a really down market. We've talked about this over the last few videos. Pokemon cards in general not doing really well. If you look at alternate arts, a lot of them have crashed and burned outside of maybe some full art supporters, which even those are starting to back off a little bit. Some of these older cards that are a little bit less popular and maybe a little bit less in existence. We talked before about the dark ages of Pokemon, where Pokemon just didn't print as many cards, like this Umbreon Prime, for example. There's 17 listings currently on TCG Player. Not a whole lot. If you look at cards from today, especially common, uncommon cards, there's hundreds, 500, 600. Some of the ultra rares, there's 100, 200, 300 in some different areas. There's only 17 of this Umbreon Prime, and because of that, look what it's done over the past year. You can see in October of 2022, it was down to 71, 74. That was its one-year high, and then really started gaining some steam. Now, Umbreon Prime, not really a competitive Pokemon, so it's not really being bought to put in old decks, but definitely a popular Pokemon, and because of that, it's really starting to see some massive growth here. It's jumped up to $86.27, which is good for about 20% growth over the past year, and with only 17 listings, it's probably going to continue climbing after that. Here's that Gengar Prime that we were just talking about. Gengar Prime, obviously popular in Lost Zone. Outside of Lost Zone, not played a whole lot in the competitive format, at least none of these older competitive formats. October of 2022, it was at a one-year low of $73.07. Went up and down a little bit, but for the most part, consistently trending upward. You can see it hit $82.41 in June. That was its one-year high. Again, about 15-16% growth over the past year. It's backed off a little bit to $81.37, but still continuing to trend in the upward direction. Here's the other evolution. This is Espeon Prime. Very cool looking card. Relatively consistent from July of 2022 all the way up until February of 2023. You can see it actually hit its one-year low in February of 2023, where it hit that $32.56 mark, but then gained about 20% over the last 6 months here. It's sitting at $39.55 currently, so that's a one-year high for that Espeon Prime. If we look at the Tyranitar Prime, really excited about Obsidian Flames. I feel like they did my boy Tyranitar a little dirty, though, because Tyranitar should have some kind of cool special illustration rare. We don't have the full set list of Obsidian Flames yet, but we're getting down there, so hopefully Tyranitar comes out swinging screen with some kind of really cool artwork. But you can see the Tyranitar Prime doing extremely well. You're looking at 40-50% growth over the past year. In October of 2022, this card was at its 1-year low of $36.92, but then just really started picking up some steam. It hit $49.76 in May of 2023. It's backed off a little bit, but only lost about $1, sitting at $48.79. So still way closer to its 1-year low, or 1-year high, than its 1-year low, and only 34 available listings on TCG Player. Here is Machamp Prime. Look at that boy. He is so big. Some of these are really cool artwork, but just kind of overlooked a little bit because they're not full art variants. You know, they're not these full art big time ultra rares. They're just prime cards. So a lot of times they just kind of get forgotten about. 1325 was its 1-year low, which it hit in August of 2022. Relatively flat for a few months before starting to slowly climb. And then in February of 2023, really starting to take off. You can see it hit about that 1-year high of 2129 in June, backed off just a real little bit, and now in July it's come back to that 2129 for its 1-year high. Only about 30 listings right now on TCG Player. Here's Celebi Prime. This one did very, very well in the competitive format because of its Forest Breath. July of 2022, it was down to $14.83. Some nice growth up until February of 2023, and then really started shooting up. So from $14.83 all the way up to $21.94. You can see it hit that 1-year high in June of 2023 before backing off a little bit. Now it's sitting at $21.84. A few more listings with this one. There's 83 available right now on TCG Player. Then we've got Scizor Prime. This one's really cool as well. In July of 2022, this one was down to $17.38. You've got almost double growth over the past year, which is extremely strong. Up until January of 2023, it was extremely flat, and then some slow trickling until March, where it really started shooting up. You can see it sitting at $29.11 currently. That's a 1-year high for the Scizor Prime. 54 available listings right now on TCG Player. Here's the big one right here, and I say big one because this one dominated competitive play with its magnetic draw. Once during your turn, you may draw cards until you have 6 cards in your hand. This power can't be used if Magnezone is affected by a special condition. Just drawing through your deck consistency, it's such a big thing in competitive play. Really want to make sure that you go through your deck as much as you possibly can, so that way you can use and utilize all available resources. And because of that, Magnezone Prime was a big card along with Yanmega, which I think is still in the show that, or in this slideshow that we'll look at in just a second here. But Magnezone Prime, we talked about that 2011 Nationals that this Lost Guard deck took top 64 at. Magnezone was in the winning deck and in quite a few of the top 8 decks as well. So from July of 2022 all the way up until January of 2023, you can see it relatively consistently sitting at its 1-year low of $12.70 before really starting to take off. Only 54 available listings, so not too many, but not too little either, but really started taking off in March of 2023. You can see it jumping all the way up to that $18.34 1-year high in July of 2023. It's only lost a few cents since then, backed off just a little bit. Here's that Yanmega Prime that we were just talking about. Insight, such a big ability right there. If you have the same number of cards in your hand as your opponent, the attack cost of Yanmega's attacks is 0. So we were talking about that Magnezone Prime, right? The ability to be able to draw up to 6 cards in your hand. That's really important, because if your opponent is sitting there with 4 cards or 3 cards or 5 cards, being able to start your hand with 6 cards every single turn or draw up to that 6-card mark means you can play basically unlimited resources while still having the ability to make sure that your hand size is the same as your opponent's. That way you can do that linear attack right there, or you can do that sonic boom attack right there, and you don't have to worry about having any energy cards attached to Yanmega Prime. You can see this trending downward a little bit for a few months last year. In October of 2022, it actually fell down to $9.41. That was its 1-year low. Percentage-wise, some really strong growth over the past year, even though you're only looking at about $2.50 worth of growth. It's still about 30% over the past 10 months or so. You can see it hit in June of 2023, that 1-year high of $12. It's backed off a little bit, sitting at $11.52 currently, but again, only 24 available listings right now for this Yanmega Prime. Very competitive card. Here's Meganium Prime. This is one of the Heart Gold Soul Silver promo cards. There were 3 different ones, obviously, because of the generation. Meganium, Typhlosion, Feraligatr. Those were the 3 promos that were built into Prime cards. In July of 2022, this one was sitting at $14.70. That was a 1-year low for this card. Jumped up in October, and you can see it get up to about that $16 mark, and then relatively flat all the way up until May of 2023, where it gained another $1 after that, jumped up to $16.99 as a one-year high. Here's the Mewprom. We talked about this card earlier. This one is very interesting because it really went down for most of the year last year. You can see in July of 2022 that $51 mark, and then trended downward all the way until December of 2022, where it really hit a valley there of $46.82. Now it's gained a little bit of a back, grown about 10% now over the past 6 months or so. So closing in on its one-year high of $50.81. It's sitting at $49.91 currently, but again, only 20 available listings on TCG Player currently. Here's the Crobat, very cool Crobat Prime. You can see in October of 2022, it was sitting at a one-year low of $15.03. Some strong growth over the past year. January of 2023 kind of leveled off a little bit, sitting at $20.02 currently, which is just off of its one-year high of $21.19. 66 available listings for that one. Here's Kingdra Prime. This one not bad in competitive play. Once during your turn, you may put one damage counter on one of your opponent's Pokemon. This power can't be used if Kingdra is affected by a special condition. Back then, HP was much lower, so one damage counter on an opponent's Pokemon made a lot bigger of a deal than it does now with Pokemon that have 300 plus hit points. In July of 2022, this one was sitting at $17.85. Saw some decent growth up until January of 2023, where things started to level off a little bit, hit that $19.50 mark. In June, it hit its one-year high of $19.89. Now it's backed off a little bit, sitting at $19.47 currently. 62 available listings for that one. Here's Donphan Prime. I think this is the last one. Donphan, not a bad Pokemon in competitive play, but again, with only about 25-30 primes out there in existence, it's surprising how many did well in the competitive field. In July of 2022, it started trending downward. You can see in October of 2022, it was down to that $7.55 mark, but almost doubled in price then after that. In May of 2023, it jumped up to a one-year high of $13.79. Now it's backed off a little bit over the past couple months. It's lost about $1, sitting at $12.37 currently with 64 available listings. Here's the Steelix Prime. I think this is actually the last one. So you can see in July of 2022, like what we saw with Donphan, slowly trending downward. In October of 2022, it hit that one-year low of $14.14, but really some nice growth after that, hitting $18.07 as its one-year high in July of 2023, and then backed off a little bit down to $18 currently with 46 available listings right now on TCG Player. Very cool cards. The whole story behind the competitive play makes it really, really special. Pokemon has been just such a big part of my life, and I think learning about kind of some of this stuff, hopefully it's interesting. If you guys enjoy it, please let me know. Hit that subscribe button down below. Leave a like, leave a comment on the video. Just some cool cards that maybe you weren't necessarily aware of, didn't draw a whole lot of attention to, and with the market being the way that it is and a lot of printings going on right now, might be something to look at a different niche, a different area of Pokemon. Maybe you want to get into the competitive side, build some old decks, whatever the case may be. Just look at some older artwork, some really cool details on a lot of these cards. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch the video. I'll be back tomorrow with a live stream, and then again on Thursday with another video. Until then, guys, thanks so much for everything. Peace!